Human beings have always wondered about the end, whether through divine prophecy, ancient texts, or their own imagination. Every culture has tried to predict how the world will end. What's fascinating, however, is that different religions and cultures each have their own story of the apocalypse. In today's video, we'll explore the various doomsday prophecies that have been told throughout history. From the Mayans to the Norse gods, to Buddhism and Hinduism, these ancient beliefs all share a vision of the end, but each sees it through a different lens. So, what is the truth behind these apocalyptic stories? The Mayans, one of the most advanced civilizations in history, were also skilled astronomers. They created one of the most accurate calendars ever, the long count calendar. And it was this calendar that led many to believe that the world would end on December 21st, 2012. The calendar measured time in cycles of 5,125 years. When this cycle was completed, many interpreted it as the end of the world. But is this really a prophecy of the end? The truth is, the Mayans didn't see time as linear. They believed in cycles, and the end of the calendar didn't mean the world would cease to exist. Instead, they thought a new era would begin. In their beliefs, time was constantly being reborn. The world was destroyed and reborn multiple times, and it would continue in cycles forever. In the Mayan worldview, the world had already ended 4 times, each destruction bringing about a new creation. And the 5th world, our world, is just one chapter in a never-ending cycle. So what we interpret as the end was actually the beginning of a new cosmic era, continuing their cycle of rebirth. While the Mayans focused on time cycles, Buddhism has a similar yet distinct view of the end. According to Buddhist teachings, the universe is in a constant state of impermanence, where everything is born, exists, and eventually dissolves. In Buddhism, this cycle is not limited to human life, but extends to entire worlds. The world itself will eventually be destroyed, but this destruction is part of a continuous process of creation and rebirth. Buddhist cosmology speaks of cycles known as kalpas, which are immense spans of time. Each kalpa ends in the destruction of the world, followed by another kalpa that begins a new creation. In this belief system, destruction isn't final. It's simply part of an eternal cycle. The end of the world in Buddhism isn't a sudden event. Instead, it's a gradual decline where all things eventually return to nothingness, only to be reborn again. Hinduism, one of the oldest religions, also teaches that the universe goes through cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction. According to the concept of Kalachakra, or the Wheel of Time, the universe is created and destroyed in an endless loop. The Hindu god Shiva is often associated with destruction. However, it's important to note that destruction in Hinduism isn't negative. It's necessary for the renewal of the world. This cycle of creation, destruction, and recreation is a cosmic process that has been happening for billions of years. Hindu texts predict that the current cycle, called Kali Yuga, will eventually reach its end. Kali Yuga is an age of darkness and corruption, but after this, the world will be destroyed and a new age, Satya Yuga, will begin. This endless cycle continues indefinitely. The Norse mythology tells of an apocalyptic event known as Ragnarok, which means the twilight of the gods. Unlike the Mayan or Buddhist view of cyclical rebirth, Ragnarok is a cataclysmic event that involves a final battle between the gods and the forces of chaos. During Ragnarok, the gods, including Odin and Thor, battle against giants, wolves, and other monstrous creatures. It's a brutal and destructive war that leads to the death of many gods and the destruction of the world as it is known. However, Ragnarok doesn't mark the absolute end. It's followed by the rebirth of the world. After the chaos and destruction, a new world will emerge from the waters, where surviving gods and 2 human survivors will repopulate the earth, starting the cycle once more. As we've seen, the apocalypse is not a one-size-fits-all concept. Each culture, each religion, has its own view of how the world will end. Some see it as a cycle, others as a final cataclysmic event. But one thing remains clear: the idea of the end is tied to the idea of renewal, rebirth, or transformation. Whether it's the Mayans, Buddhists, Hindus, or Norse mythology, the apocalypse is seen not just as a final end, but as a stepping stone to something new. These ancient stories remind us that the end is not always the end. It might be the beginning of something even greater. In the end, maybe the apocalypse isn't about destruction at all, but about transformation.